Hi, everyone. Welcome to Coffee Chat with CastleHill. Today, I'm joined by Elaine Duffas from Wolters Kulwer. And I'd like to thank you, Elaine, for joining me and just talk a little bit about regulatory change management and automating regulatory change management. So maybe you can just give a little bit of background about yourself and Wolters Kulwer.
Sure. Well, for me, I'm a career compliance person. Been in the industry probably 20, let's say 20 plus years. Several as chief compliance officer in securities and insurance in some banking organizations, and in 2019 actually moved to retire from the industry. And one of the last projects I worked on at my former firm was implementing Wolters Kluwer's reg change management compliance solution, and I was very enamored by it in that I had done manual reg change processing for so many years. Really enjoyed how it worked, and approached Wolters Kluwer about supporting it here, and the rest, as they say, is sort of history. So I unretired, and here I am, and enjoying supporting the product here. As for Wolters Kluwer, it's been around a long time, since the early 1800s, and in fact started out as a publishing company with a deep network of subject matter experts, which we have retained that over the years, and now focus more on software solutions, professional information and services for a number of industries, including the legal and regulatory sectors.
So you've moved from the two interns in a closet method to the actual one of the industry leading content providers. So
It's awesome. I was they kind of make fun at me about how passionate I am about it. And I think it comes through when I talk to our prospects and customers, because I've been on the other side of the table and know what an ugly process that can be if you don't have the right tools and resources. So
I like to call it fun. Yes, fun. We'll call it. so, so let's talk about automation of regulatory change, because I think that people sometimes misunderstand it. Sometimes people think about automation of regulatory change as sort of the activity that Wolters Kluwer does, as going and actually digitizing regulations, as opposed to the actual process that we were just talking about, right? Actually sitting there and understanding these regulations. Let's talk a little bit about that.
well, what automation of reg changes is where we're going out and getting that information from all the regulatory bodies that an organization is supervised by, and some that just provide guidance. Like there are certain we call them regulatory bodies that aren't regulators, but they do provide a lot of information. Like the FFIC is probably a good example in the banking space, where they provide a lot of good information. So what Wolters Kluwer does is go out and get that information. And we also all know, those of us who have done this day in and day out, is every one of these organizations puts out a lot of releases of different flavors, some more important than others, some more on point to reg change, some maybe speeches or enforcement actions, things like that. So we pull all that information in and then send it to you through a feed where you can then operationalize that information, and it's all structured in a way that's easy to digest, and it all looks very similar across the different regulators. For reporting purposes and things like that. But in any case, you're able to take the parts and pieces of that perhaps new obligation and send it to the parts of your organization that need to do something about it, or maybe just need to know about it. So that's really what automating reg changes is, to get you the transparency about what's happening, so that your regulators know what you're doing, and your boards and others internally that look at what you do, and then to also be able to prove that this is why we did or didn't do the thing we did. We have all the decisions are made here. We can show approved certain things, or who actually did the work to implement something, and what they did and why they did it. And it's all in one place, instead of being all over your organization in spreadsheets and different project folders, which was my experience for many years.
You said two key things there, right? Operationalize and transparency, right? Those are great keywords, I think, for the whole automation concept in this space.
Oh, definitely.
Getting that operational flow of the information to the right people and having the traceability across the entire process. I mean, so in that, prior to your retirement and unretirement, what did it look like? I mean, was that all SharePoint sites and file shares and things like that?
We had gotten to the point at some of the organizations I worked with over the years. We had gotten to the point where we were creating homegrown processes using things like, you say, SharePoint and things like that. But predominantly, I'd say it was spreadsheets, and that's really my experience even today, when we're out talking to prospects, and is that many, and surprisingly many, larger organizations are still managing that way, because it seems like everybody gets, especially today when there's so many wonderful things you can offer your customer in the way of automation and all that, and technology. But it seems that the compliance department may not be first in line for those resources to get things automated there, which is, of course, I find so odd, because, if something goes awry there, that's, it could be a safety and soundness issue. It could be a consumer protection issue. I mean, there's so much that could go wrong. So
You could be taking the unfortunate walk out the front door, right?
exactly. And speaking, what we were talking about a minute ago with the transparency, what I ran into, particularly in the security space, more so than banking perhaps, but was that our regulators wanted to know when a regulatory obligation, a new law, rule, or reg came through, they wanted to see, even if we determined that it didn't apply to us, they wanted to see that what was that rationale. And then they wanted to know, what was the process if we decide to sell that product, say it was, product associated or something. If we decided to sell that product next year or do that certain activity, how would we know it didn't apply to us then? So you had to actually have a manual process then to, put a tickler file together that said, hey, we have to look at this thing that doesn't even apply to us right now again next year to see if it applies to us, and if not, again, we want to be able to put our rationale down as to why. And so it can get, if you can imagine doing that, in a complex organization that may have a half a dozen regulators that actively supervise them, and to be able to keep track of all that in a manual way, although we all did it for many years. But it's I would urge anybody who can automate today to definitely pursue it, find out about it.
Yep. So and you mentioned it, touched on it a little bit, right? So there's institutions that are all shapes and sizes. We have all different, monoline or multi-dimensional financial services institutions. How would they know when they need to go and automate this, right? When is the two interns in the closet not sufficient?
Yeah, well, probably the ugliest and most important example is if you missed something. If your institution got caught off guard by something that came down the pike, they missed it, and then a regulator, who you never want to be the one to find those sort of things, but if it's found out that way, or worse, there is some sort of issue with a consumer protection or something like that, maybe a disclosure that wasn't being made. So that's the biggest example. If your reg change process, your manual process today is missing things, and frankly, we all know that just to look at the laws, rules, and regs that are coming out is about all you have time to do. But we all know too that things are buried in speeches and other guidance that comes out that is really, that's your horizon scanning. And unless you've got an army, to do that, you really do need to automate that. But that's probably the most important thing. And the other is, this was my experience, and I haven't seen it any different in my experience here at Wolters Kluwer working with our customers and prospects. And that's who does all that web scraping and reading all those emails and all those industry and legal alerts and things to try to figure out, what's going on and what might apply, what's coming down the pike. Who does all that work at an organization is almost always the most experienced compliance professional on your team, the person who you really want to be doing something much more meaningful and important, like helping with implementation or assessing risk and things like that. But they're stuck doing that work. And why? And I know because I did it too. They're doing it because they're the only person probably on your team that would be able to issue spot when they're looking at the speech or the new law, rule, or reg or something like that. So that's why they're doing that. So wouldn't it be wonderful to be able to have them come into work in the morning, go onto a desktop, and boom, there's the list of things they need to look at today. And by the way, some of those maybe were shot off to other people to look at that they didn't even have to touch because they fall into certain buckets or they have to do with certain areas of the business or what have you. So yeah, that's they're probably the two biggest things that just efficiency and to protect the institution.
That's an interesting point. We certainly find two different patterns, we'll call it, of people implementing these types of things and automating them. One is there's sort of that reach out to the experts aspect of it, right? So even with the automation, there's still that opportunity to surface things to the expert. But like you said, they don't have to worry about the noise as much, right? The things that are either very evident that they need to be evaluated or things that are, for future gestation or other things of that sort. Or we see in some other industries where there's a parallel path activity, which, if you're not doing it in some automated way, must just be incredibly difficult. If you're sending it to multiple experts who now have to coordinate their response, and the transparency and operation of that is must be very exciting to keep going with.
There's another thing you just reminded me of, that a use of automation that didn't occur to me initially, but now I see the value in it as I've gotten to know more about how to do it, and that is to use that workflow when those things come in, to use that workflow to document. You talk about sending something to the experts and the compliance expert, but also if you need to send something out to legal, for example, lots of times compliance has to reach out to legal and say, what are our real obligations here? So you've got that all documented in the story of your implementation or not, or whatever you decide to do with that, whatever's coming down. And another thing too, another very helpful thing, I know a lot of times I just used emails to inform executives. There was a big enforcement action. I wanted to get something out there to say, here, look at what happened over at institution B here. This is how this won't happen here because we have these controls in place or whatever it was. And just to remind them how important those controls are and things like that. So, and then if there was ever when did he know and how did he know it moment, I had to pull up and go through all these emails and pull those off. This way, again, it's all on the same thread. Here's the whole story of how we looked at that new standard that came down. So it's a lot of times when we're talking to prospects, I notice that they really are very focused on a certain way to use reg change, the reg change process in the workflows that are the potential workflows that are there, and they're kind of rigid about it. But there's just so much more you can do, and that's why we try to really find out as much as we can about an organization's current process so that we can, get them there, maybe help them improve it. But if the process works and it's just manual, then let's figure out how to make it happen for you in an automated way where you come through, very often there when we're implementing within Archer. So really appreciate your team and our partnerships there.
I appreciate it. So you've convinced me. I don't want to take that walk out the front door escorted by the folks in uniform. But hey, I don't have the budget. You talked about that before. Compliance often doesn't get the resources. So how do we convince people to get the budget?
Well, I know ways I've done it in the past, and I think it's probably a little easier now, but fundamentally it's still the same. You've got to convince them of the importance of what your reg change management program is to the big picture. And really it's the linchpin, honestly, but you have to paint that picture for them. And I think that's relatively easy to do, particularly if you show here's how we do it today in our automated way, and here's how it would work. I'm sorry, in our manual way, and here's how it would work if we were to automate. So, and there you'd be getting into the efficiencies that would be effectuated from automation, like what we were talking about a few minutes ago, where you have, your very expensive compliance resources wasting their time or using more of their time than you'd like, doing really the mundane tasks of just, web browsing and trying to find out what's going on that might apply to your organization. So that's the picture you have to be able to paint for them, I think. And that may be, if you do have just like you say, a few interns, et cetera, you might want to use some metrics related to the number of, you've got your spreadsheets, what you're processing, and perhaps there's some not too difficult way to figure out how much did we have to look at in order to come up with that number that we process. So I mean, somehow come up with some metrics and timing and the FTE it takes to do what you do, and then how you might be able to reconfigure your resources to be doing things that are more important if that person's now freed up, as we talked about before. So it's really about painting that picture about how you're doing it today and what improvements could be found by automation, I think. And probably the last thing, I think I've done this one time before because it just had to happen, but one thing, one idea too is if you're really hitting your head against the wall, not getting the resources that you need, is to ask for funding or whatever resources formally. And that would be in whoever you're reporting up to, if it's a board or it's a compliance committee, that would be sort of maybe the court of last resort, because regulators do read those minutes. And if they were to see that, oh, I see for 3 quarters running, they're asking you for some resources. What are you doing about that? So that's, as I say, maybe not the first thing you do, but certainly an option if you really feel like you're not getting any headway.
But that efficiency, the ROI based on the efficiency should certainly hopefully is going to go a long way towards that. Because when you get into the more, more challenge-based type of situations, right? Of saying, we need this budget because we don't want you to go to jail, or we need this budget because it's, something we've reported out as a deficiency. Those things can be more argumentative, certainly. So, yep, great. So, I've gotten my funding. That's awesome. I used Elaine's advice and I put it in my board minutes, and I did it the bad way. And so they said, great, you're gonna have your funding, but it's 2022 or 2023 budget. So what do I do in the meantime, right? How do I survive? Just keep plugging along, or what can I do to get ready?
There's plenty to do to get ready, actually, and I had to do this personally, so I'm coming from a real place here, telling you about it. First of all, you want to make sure your reg change process is fully documented the way you do it today, because that's going to allow you to figure out who's really involved in the process. And there's going to be business people. There's going to be people all up and down the food chain in your organization who are involved in reg change. So that's going to help you identify them and to give you a good idea of really what you're doing today. So later on, you can figure out what works. What do we really like? What would we like to replace? What would we like to change completely? You know, whatever, but document the process. So, and now you know who's involved in it. And so you want to engage people, you want to engage those people as stakeholders in your year-long or whatever it is process to automate as you prepare. So bring them in. You certainly want to talk to your procurement people, find out, are there any organizations, are we using Wolters Kluwer for CRA today or something like that, or other organizations that can help. There also can be other parts of your in your technology. There could be other systems and things that may be able to help you in the interim to get there. So you were talking about SharePoint and some things later. There's some other things you might be able to do, but probably last but not least, I'd say you certainly want to think about maybe pursuing an RFP process. Because now that you've documented your whole process, you know who's involved, you can ask them, hey, if I waved a magic wand and you could get any way, you know, this could be done any way you want. Then you can sort of get that wish list of what your stakeholders need and bake that, you know, decide what you're going to bake into an RFP process. That's always, you know, that's always a good way to go. And I think one thing actually to do would be to take those spreadsheets, which most of us, as I say, are using today. Take those spreadsheets and work them, clean them up, because, you know, there's all different people have been working them over the years and putting different things in there. Clean them up and maybe think about mapping your, you know, your key citations to your business units or to policies, or just start making those connections now, because then, and Tim, you can speak more to this than I can, but I know that there's lots of magic that you do, that when people do map how they want things connected in their organization, that can be automated at implementation of the solution.
It's a good point. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think sometimes we find that people start to get focused on the content, which is technically available electronically, as opposed to those connections and what the real usage of the data is. So
Exactly.
they start thinking about, well, I really want to make sure that I get these three regulators, whereas that's the stuff that you specialize in and can ensure is actually happening, as opposed to those connections, which really provide that ROI overall. So good advice.
Yeah, definitely.
So you started out as a implementer and then came over to the, you know, to the tool side of it. What was special about Wolters Kluwer when you were going through the implementation? What that made you want to then jump over there, and what have you seen since then? What's Wolters Kluwer's special sauce?
Our special sauce, well, there's quite a bit of it actually, and you know, I did get to see a few different solutions in my time in compliance, obviously. And what impressed me most and continues to at Wolters Kluwer is the depth and breadth of our coverage. And we are global, of course, but I would say I think we're approaching you know, 1,000 reg bodies that we monitor globally. So the fact that while we do use artificial intelligence, of course, to grab information and to pick out the, you know, the natural language processing and you know, things like that. There is a validation process by a human expert to, okay, the AI, you know, pulled in and told us these things. Now the expert looks and sees what that looks like and makes sure, yes, that's really what that's supposed to look like before it goes out. The fact that our customers can not only choose which regulators they need to subscribe to. We don't make them, for example, buy a bundle. Here's the banking bundle, and you have to subscribe to these 7 or 8 regulators. No, you tell us which regulators you really want to, and agencies that you need to subscribe to. And then you can further configure that before it goes into your workflow to say, even though I want to receive those speeches and enforcement actions, for example, I don't want those flying into workflow. I'd like those to just, be in my record that I can go see them when I need to look at them. But for workflow, we'll retain that just for actual reg changes or what have you. It's whatever an organization wants to do. And another thing that Wolters Kluwer does that is very different and sets us apart is we really begin to chain that fire hose before they ever see our content. When you have regulators like the FTC, for example, who regulates multiple industries, well, you don't want to be receiving things from them that have to do with all kinds of topics that have nothing to do with your industry. So what Wolters Kluwer does is to go in and look at the sections of law, rule, or regulation for that agency or regulatory body, and just monitors those sections that are relevant to financial services. So you're not getting all that noise. So I guess they're the, I actually neglected the one that probably impresses me the most, and that is the linking when an update comes in from a regulatory body. What happens in the system, again, using AI and human experts, is that update is dynamically linked to any sections in your organization's library, regulatory library, that it amends or repeals or cites or references. So that user, when they click into a new case, can see, especially if you've done some mapping on your part too, to say this goes to certain parts of our organization, here's a policy that it affects, but it's also going to show you, we're going to show you through the feed, how it also is tied to your library, so that it's just an excellent holistic look of that reg change or guidance or whatever it is that has come in. I feel like I babbled a lot there, Tim, but did any of that come across okay?
It did. There's a lot of different pieces that make for effective content, and I know it's why we selected Wolters Kluwer as one of our partners for that reason. I think the only thing I would add is maybe the consistency aspect, and that's a little bit more on a technical side. From that side, is the consistency of the content is also really important. Like you said, when somebody signs up for the content, they're signing up for a regulatory body or something along those lines. It's not a prepackaged sort of capability, but all of the content comes consistently, regardless of what it is. And that's very important from a technical perspective, to get that, again, back to the ROI and the funding and the justification for this. Having that stuff come through consistently makes it a lot simpler and more straightforward to route to the right people. So. And then we're just running up on time. So anything you wanted to add, Elaine? I really appreciate you coming, but what's the two words of advice for folks who are not automated from a regulatory change management perspective? And what are those two words of advice you give them besides tell the board about it?
I was going to say that's three words. No, I got to say it's automated. They've got to do it. Find a way.
Yep. There you go. Awesome. Thanks, Elaine. I really appreciate your time, and thank you everyone for joining us.
All right. Take care.